Good evening. On today's Angry Bulletin. Of all the flights I've witnessed in decades of being a spaceflight fan, I have never seen anything like this. A truly magnificent performance of engineering on the part of a rocket that is advancing quickly in its developmental process. However, all of that being said, we need to remember that a long road remains ahead between what we saw yesterday and Starship becoming a 100% reusable vehicle that can carry human beings to the moon, Mars, and beyond. All of this and more coming at you on the Angry Astronaut right now. Good evening, and once again, welcome to another Angry Bulletin. And yeah, I am up rather late at night here in the UK recording this because I have a very full schedule tomorrow and need to get this analysis out as rapidly as possible. Would have been nice, I guess, to get it out today, but I'll tell you, I turned out quite a lot of content today as it was, and that flight left me exhausted, drained on every conceivable level. What SpaceX managed to accomplish was nothing short of miraculous. Just an amazing, amazing achievement, getting not only the soft landing of the booster in the water, but also a splashdown at under at least some degree of control in the Indian Ocean. Very impressive indeed. I am not yet calling that, however, a soft landing any more than I'm going to call what happened on the moon with some of these recent landing attempts by these landers from Intuitive Machines, for example, and that sort of thing. Don't really want to call those soft landings either. More like crash landings. But there's a whole lot of perspectives, a whole lot of reactions as to what happened yesterday. This is how a lot of people think that Starship landed. And this is probably a better estimate of how Starship actually landed.
Not to worry, we are still flying half a ship.
And herein lies part of the problem. As near as I could tell, Starship executed a re-entry exactly as it was supposed to. The attitude towards the atmosphere was exactly right to present the heat shield to the atmosphere to provide the maximum amount of protection for the ship. Everything was right as far as trajectory was concerned, and as you're going to see, the altitude actually was very, very well thought out to minimize the amount of damage, the amount of punishment that that heat shield was going to endure during the landing process. All of that was extremely well executed. But here's the problem. If all of that was done so well, why was Starship in the condition that it was when it finally splashed down in the Indian Ocean? I don't think that the damage was just restricted to that one flap, just because the camera happened to be pointed at that one flap. My suspicion is this ship suffered a considerable amount of damage all over the damn thing. It is nothing short of miraculous and a testament to the stainless steel construction of Starship that the internal systems were intact enough to be able to execute a flip turn, that amazing flap was able to somehow still function sufficiently, even though it had lost a lot of its aerodynamic stability by all the damage that that flap has taken to execute that flip turn and set down in the water at least something resembling vertical. Again, we can't be certain exactly how Starship settled in the Indian Ocean. It appears that maybe it was pretty vertical and then just kind of flopped over, but that also could have been the ship hovering for a moment as the engines kept it from slamming into the ocean, and then slapping into the Indian Ocean after the burn was completed. There are a wide variety of possibilities. I am not going to be convinced that that was a perfect landing in the Indian Ocean until I actually see it from the outside. And of course, we're not going to be able to do that because we didn't have any cameras at the landing location. And therein lies also a bit of the problem. SpaceX absolutely would have had cameras on site to film the ship making this landing attempt if they had the slightest idea of where it was going to land. I think that they had a landing corridor based on the re-entry trajectory, but there were many things about how they were doing this that made a precise location a little difficult to determine. All they could do is just make sure that it wasn't going to crash into the coast of Australia, which they definitely did. But nevertheless, there are many other things about this flight that I think are just as impressive as hell, but at the same time demonstrates what a long road we still have between what we saw yesterday and what is going to be necessary for a Starship HLS to put astronauts on the moon. So first observation, what a fantastic liftoff. Again, we can't be certain about what sort of punishment the OLM may have sustained during this liftoff. Those 33, or rather 32 Raptor engines, we had a failure very early in the liftoff process, but still, those engines do just an enormous amount of punishment to anything underneath them, and the OLM has sustained at least some damage with every liftoff. We'll see how well it endured this last time. By the way, you can see that the burn is a bit fuel rich by the color, and the reason that's the case is because you have one engine malfunction, so you have a bit too much fuel getting fed into the remaining 32 engines. Not a serious problem. I was a bit worried about the propulsion system with the failure of that one engine, but really no cause for concern whatsoever. This was a textbook liftoff. It's getting almost routine now as far as the ascent is concerned, but after that, that's where things get a lot more difficult, and that's where SpaceX really shone. It was an amazing accomplishment. We're just going to go ahead and skip here to the separation of the stages and then the jettisoning of the hot staging ring that came afterwards. There's just been talk that this isn't going to be necessary on future flights. I don't see why. I mean, why would they have done it once in the first place? They're trying to get the mass of the booster under control, reduce the mass, that is, to what is absolutely necessary so that they can control the booster during the return flight. The lighter it is, the easier it is to control and to execute that landing burn, but we'll see how things go with future flights. And there goes the hot staging ring, as we were discussing. Couldn't have been more textbook. A very, very impressive process. So now we have to go to the landing, the successful splashdown of the Super Heavy booster. The only thing that concerns me, and I noticed this, a lot of people noticed it, of all the debris that suddenly flew past the booster during that landing attempt. That suggests to me that we could have had an engine explode. If we did have an engine explosion, that's going to be a mishap as far as the FAA is concerned. That means mishap reports, corrective actions, blah, blah, blah. Let's hope that all that was is some kind of insulation material or something. But the exploding engine, if that indeed is what it was, did not prevent the booster from soft landing in the Gulf of Mexico. Very impressive indeed, and yes, all of these SpaceX personnel have reason to celebrate. That was a spectacular accomplishment. So then we had a long time to wait, or at least it felt like a long time, as Starship executed a suborbital flight about halfway around the world to a re-entry attempt over the Indian Ocean. And it was at this point that the miracle occurred. I mean, this is nothing short of a miracle in terms of what happened during this re-entry. A miracle that the cameras were able to provide footage of the re-entry attempt all the way down to the ocean. A miracle that Starship was sustaining as much damage as it was during the re-entry process and still was functional enough to carry out that flip turn. Unreal. And again, a testament to the engineering and to the quality of construction that the folks at Boca Chica are capable of. It's amazing. But I'd like you to watch this. Watch how the altitude of Starship actually doesn't change very much for a long period of time. It hovers at 68 kilometers for a very sustained period. The reason for this is they are trying to gain enough lift on Starship at an altitude that reduces the amount of damage that the heat shield is taking. In other words, they're bleeding off a lot of speed without plunging a whole lot deeper into the atmosphere where the heat shield is going to take a lot more damage. This is, by the way that they did things with the space shuttle to reduce the amount of damage its heat shield would take. The difference, of course, with the shuttle is after Starship bled off all of this speed, obviously it was still taking an enormous amount of punishment. The heat was bleeding straight through the stainless steel, straight through the heat shield protection, at least on this flap, and I'm pretty sure that was happening to the other flap on the other side of Starship as well, and I would be shocked if Starship wasn't suffering a lot of punishment pretty much down the length of the vehicle, losing lots of heat tiles and the stainless steel beneath slowly giving way under the intense damage being wrought by this unbelievable heat that one experiences during a re-entry. By the way, if Starship is ever returning, say, from a lunar mission, the heat that it's going to be experiencing are going to be orders of magnitude more difficult than what Starship experienced on this particular re-entry. On a lunar mission, the velocity is much, much higher during re-entry, so Starship has a bit of a ways to go on the heat shield. By the time Starship actually got down to the point to where it would execute its flip turn, it was no doubt a flaming wreck, and yet still, unbelievably, against all odds, it was able to execute its flip turn, conduct a landing burn, even though the telemetry doesn't show that there was a landing burn. We didn't see the engines light up at all, indicating that some of the sensors were probably destroyed by now, but at the same time, there was a landing burn at the appropriate point. For those who believe that Starship slowly settled down into the ocean, though, at that point, the same way that the booster did, there is a very, very big difference between when this landing burn occurred and how quickly Starship flopped over in the ocean compared to how things worked with the booster. If you look at the booster, you can see that it hovered for a sustained period of time while the engines were slowing it down, arresting the downward momentum and bringing Starship to almost a complete halt before it eventually settled down in the ocean. You can see that it was a very protracted process before it finally flopped over. If you compare that to what we saw with the orbiter, there was a landing burn pretty much at the last second, and then all of a sudden the rocket was in the water. I don't really think that it settled down nice and even and vertical in the ocean. I could be wrong about that, but it just doesn't look that way to me if you compare the two landing burns. But once again, these are minor footnotes for the most part. SpaceX accomplished everything that they set out to do. There might have been a couple of little things like the exploding engine, maybe on Super Heavy, that might create a mishap situation with the FAA, but overall, I would say SpaceX accomplished 99.9% of their objectives in this amazing flight. So why am I expressing any sort of reservations about any of this? Well, once again, I need to emphasize my position on all of this. My opinions about Starship would be very, very different if SpaceX did not have a contracted obligation to put human beings on the moon by the third quarter of 2026. We're talking a little over 2 years from now. In spite of all of the accomplishments that we saw yesterday, Starship is nowhere close from being a 100% reusable rocket. And if we have to expend the upper stage, the orbiter part of Starship, again and again with every refueling attempt during the Artemis missions, that's going to be a lot of money that's getting thrown away. And it's also going to delay the launch cadence a bit. If you have to build new orbiters with every refueling attempt, well, that's 20 tankers minimum for the unmanned landing attempt that's theoretically supposed to be taking place in 2025, and then the human landing attempt in 2026. I mean, would you want to be in this ship under the current circumstances? No, I really don't think we want humans on this thing anytime soon. Now, granted, you're not going to have to do any atmospheric re-entries with the Artemis missions anyway. But at the same time, if you need 20 separate tankers to carry out the necessary refuelings for the unmanned and human-rated missions to the moon, just to get Artemis 3 done, and on top of that, well, you need to really get the process mastered of capturing that booster too, the super heavy booster. As of right now, not a single chopsticks landing attempt has been made. We might be close to the point to where that can happen. Might need one more ocean landing to be sure that they've got the process nailed for controlling the super heavy booster before they really attempt a chopsticks landing grab, but they may try it on the next mission. Who knows? But if anything goes wrong with any of those missions, if a chopsticks landing goes awry, that's going to be probably a very violent explosion and another mishap report to the FAA. And of course, we need to talk about the state of Starship during this re-entry. There's no way in hell you would want to try to reuse this thing. There's no way in hell that any sane spaceport operator would want this flaming fireball to try to land at their facility. This thing really needs a total workover when it comes to its heat shield. Clearly, Starship's heat shield does not begin to measure up to the capabilities of the space shuttle. It's not easy to say that, but if you compare what the space shuttle looked like during its maiden flight compared to the re-entry attempt that we saw with Starship yesterday, pretty big difference there, guys. I hate to say it, but it's true. When it comes to the heat shield's trial by fire, it just didn't do very well yesterday, and if Starship is sustaining this kind of punishment and practically falling apart while it's re-entering, there's no way the FAA is going to let this thing make a re-entry over the United States and attempt a landing at Boca Chica, Cape Canaveral, or any place else. What I'm trying to say is we've got a bit of a wait ahead of us before we're going to see total reusability on the part of the orbiter. Needs a lot more work on the heat shield, and that's something that isn't going to happen overnight. Once again, though, I want to be totally clear. What was accomplished yesterday was astonishing. It was a huge leap forward, and we should all be happy about that. SpaceX deserves to be proud of themselves. I would like to thank my latest Patreon supporters, Steve Thompson, Paul O'Driscoll, Thomas Wallstrom, and finally Donnie Counts. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for your generous support. It's going to make a massive difference to my ability to go to Saxavord to see a very exciting launch attempt here in Europe. So thank you so much for that support. If you would also like to be part of our Patreon family, and by the way, I'm about to release our third exclusive video, this one about the Mach effect thrust thruster that's coming out today, actually. So if you'd like to become part of the Patreon family, well, all the details are in the description. Please like, please subscribe, and as always, stay angry about space.